Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, former ambassador to Italy. And Ambassador, the Prime Minister, he began his outreach address by talking about returning to power for the third time. How significant is the statement of Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he's on world stage and talking about democracy? He's called India the mother of democracy. In a democratic election, he's been re-elected for the third time, the National Democratic Alliance, sir.
Very interestingly put, Gaurav. Now, one has to contrast Mr. Modi's position with those of the other participants of actual G7. Most of them have either faced a defeat in the European parliamentary election last week or are going to face defeat, as is speculated about Mr. Sunak in the parliamentary elections in UK and about the
President
French
Biden
Prime Minister Macron
yes,
in the National Assembly elections. So you have a contrast between one who's just got another mandate in the parliamentary elections in India and others whom the popular vote or popular opinion polls seem to be rejecting in terms of their leadership. And you can see it in the body language. Mr. Modi was confident when he met people. Others were hesitant, including Zelensky. Zelensky was hesitant when he met Mr. Modi, and Mr. Modi was the first to embrace him. The second thing, and more importantly, whether there is an election in their countries or not, the fact is that they do not, unlike in the past summits, have anything to offer in financial terms. Yes. They are themselves facing financial crisis, so they cannot be the giver of aid or giver of money, whether it is energy security, whether it is global warming, or any of the major issues facing this world. All they can do is dip into the money that they have grabbed from Russia and give it to Ukraine on an interest-free loan.
And that $50 billion is another bone of contention. We'll get Geeta also to respond to that. But Ambassador Sikri, I want to just quote what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said. Geeta Mohan has sent us this report. Prime Minister expressed that it was a matter of great satisfaction for him to be attending the summit after his re-election in the largest democratic exercise in the history of humankind. He expressed that for technology to be successful, it had to be underpinned by a human-centric approach. In this context, he shared India's success in leveraging digital technology for public service delivery. So the Prime Minister referring to his electoral victory at the G7 outreach. What's the message that India is sending out to the G7 countries, to the outreach countries and the world at large, Ambassador?
Well, you know, we must see his remark, and I think it was very appropriately, very well put by Prime Minister Modi. We must see his remark in the context of the barrage of unfair criticism which had been leveled against India in the months running up to the summit by all the leading newspapers of the world, whether it was the WAPO or the NYT or the Financial Times or the Guardian or any other paper in Canada, even in France, even in Germany. There was a barrage of almost an attack on India's democracy, saying, oh, it's not really a democracy and this and that. I think the election results, the way in which they were conducted over a period of 7 weeks, no violence at all, very marginal violence, and absolutely free and fair results. This acceptance by the world, and we've seen in the days after the results have been declared that the world they have eaten their own words, as it were, and come out and accepted that indeed these elections were the freest and the fairest ever seen in the world. Yep. The electorate in India is more than the population of the entire European Union combined. And the number of people who voted, even they were, you know, more than the population of most of the countries with the exclusion of China. So it's a tremendous tribute to India's free and fair elections, to our democratic process, and the world has recognized it. That's number one. Number two, I think what he said on artificial intelligence is very important because he called for a human-centric approach.
Yes.
And you know, even Pope Francis, when he spoke on artificial intelligence and he led the debate on artificial intelligence, he also cast doubt on how artificial intelligence, unless it's very carefully controlled, can be misused and can mislead people. We already know that some of the largest companies in the world who have set up these AI programs, ChatGPT and so on, they're having to apologize because they know that those programs are misleading individuals,
Yes.
particularly younger people, and they can put wrong ideas in their minds. So I think this is a very important debate on artificial intelligence.
And this human-centric approach for the benefit of humankind, Geeta, the Prime Minister has emphasized it on this platform and on multiple platforms, the direct benefit transfer and how DBT is something that the world actually wants to emulate. You've reported on that even in the past. Bring us more details of what the Prime Minister said, Geeta.
Well, the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi focused on the areas that are of particular focus in the outreach session, which is data, data privacy, security, artificial intelligence, Africa, the Mediterranean, Indo-Pacific, and Africa. Very specific to AI and digital, the fact that other countries lauded India, particularly President Macron, goes to show that India takes this responsibility of artificial intelligence and the digital space very, very seriously. And security breaches, or for that matter, security of data is something that's very, very important and very close to the administration's heart. We will have to wait and see how there's going to be cooperation on this, not just data security, but also the bigger picture of big data, data transfer, how they're looking at digitizing and how they're looking at protection of data of the citizens of the respective countries, even if there is cooperation. So on all those fronts, Prime Minister Narendra Modi did speak, emphasize on the importance of that. But on other fronts, in terms of security, in terms of strategic, Prime Minister Narendra Modi re-emphasized India's position, and also which really, Gaurav, highlights where India stands today in the G7 and across the world.
Ambassador Dogra, he's also telling the world, as a developing country, India is doing all that we can, perhaps ahead of our goals and the targets, but the world needs to do more, Ambassador Dogra.
Well, exactly. I think it is good that energy security and energy supplies are being highlighted, because had it not been for India's insistence that we must continue to import oil from Russia, the Petroleum Ministry ensured that, the world at large would have suffered. The prices would have gone up. Europe, which has, through India, been importing a lot of Russian oil, would have suffered economically much more than it is suffering already. The other thing is that you pointed out very rightly that this is the 5th time Prime Minister has attended the G7 summit, and 11th time that an Indian Prime Minister has attended G7 summit. Now, that by itself is an acknowledgement of the respect and also the regard that India has held in as a responsible power. And at this juncture, when the world is passing through multiple crises, be it Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, or financially, unemployment, the fact that besides energy security, the world has also to think in terms of the food grain security, because if things escalate in Ukraine, the food grain may not be available in the same quantity. And in
food,
the same
fuel, fertilizer, 3 things that India has repeated.
The entire thing. And that is why a responsible country like India, which not only provides for itself and secures essential things for itself, but also things for others and provides for them, including something which was very unheard of in earlier times, to Europe and indirectly to America itself. That's why America is so quiet on this oil purchase from Russia. So
absolutely,
India has a role which is grudgingly but increasingly being recognized by the Western world now.
Interesting you should say that, because Ambassador Sikri, the Prime Minister reiterated India's commitment to speak about the well-being of the global South, which is ironically a major sufferer because of this global uncertainty. I want to read out what the Prime Minister's office, the Ministry of External Affairs, has just put out. India will continue to work closely with Africa, a glimpse of which was seen during last year's G20 summit when the African Union became a permanent member of the forum, and that too during India's presidency, unquote. But Ambassador Sikri, are the G7 countries doing enough when they have clean energy? Are they sharing it enough and quickly when it comes to technology with the developing world, whether it's Africa, India, or other countries that are developing, ma'am?
Yeah, I think sharing of technology is certainly a big issue for India and for the rest of the global south. And I think one of the very important opportunities that Prime Minister Modi's participation in this G7 has given him is to present the results of the G20 summit, which were held just about 7 or 8 months ago in India, and the entire year of meetings in India that yielded a lot of very positive directions and decisions and consensual decisions on a wide range of subjects, including food security, energy security, digital security, and so on. And all these, the Prime Minister is now presenting to G7 in the hope that the G7 and the G20 can work together. We do know that all these decisions that were done during the G20, India's chairmanship of the G20, had the Global South fully at the front of its attention. The African Union's admission as a member of the G20 is one example of this, but even so many other areas, the interests of the Global South were fully protected and projected.
Yes.
And this is now being done at the G7 level as well. So the discussions with the Prime Minister of Italy, with the entire G7, we know that President of Brazil is there and he's the current chairman of the G20.
Yes.
This gives a very valuable opportunity for India, Brazil, and other countries to work together to carry forward the interests of the Global South in the forum of the G7. And I think the coordination that should result from such a meeting as the G7, between G7 and G20, is very important for the future welfare of the world. We do know that very important decisions have been announced recently. For example, Saudi Arabia has gone back on the entire petrodollars agreement.
Yes.
What impact will this have on the world economy? It's a very vital opportunity to discuss it at this forum, because we do know that this agreement being, reverted after 40 years of actual agreement since 1974, 50 years of the agreement, and really more, 80 years after the Bretton Woods 1944 agreement. So it's really a very major thing, and we don't know yet what the impact on the world economy is going to be, the impact on the role of the dollar in the world economy is going to be.
And if the Chinese currency will become stronger and the US currency becomes weaker, would be an aspect. But for a moment, I want to focus, Ambassador Dogra, on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That warm hug, the conversation, both Prime Minister and President Zelensky tweeting about it, or putting out a post on X about it. What do you make of that? What would President Zelensky's expectations be from India?
Well, before I answer that, let me compliment Geeta Mohan on a nice studio she set up in Brindisi. Very nice backdrop. But coming to Zelensky, it's whether it is Zelensky's ego or Ukrainian national interest, which is paramount and which should be paramount, there's a lot of confusion in that. At times it seems that Zelensky is driven by an agenda which is more personal than national. The second thing is the outside actors. Is America really interested that Russia should have the territories, the Russian territories?
Yes.
The 4 territories that President Putin has talked about is mainly the Russian nationals who live there and have lived there for centuries.
Yes.
So America is not interested that Russia should get away with that part of Ukraine, largely for the reason that it is mineral rich. Some people estimate that it is as much as $50 trillion of mineral wealth there.
Yes.
And some of the minerals are extremely important for the modern technology, which goes into artificial intelligence and the rest of the computer business. So there is a lot that is going on behind the scenes, and there's a lot of selfish interest involved.
Okay.
One is Zelensky's selfish interest, the other is America's selfish interest. More than that, there is also the elections coming up in America.
Yes.
Biden has already been criticized for the mess he made in Afghanistan. He's also been criticized for the wrong decisions he's making in Hamas-Israel issue. If something goes to the disadvantage of Zelensky and America combined, then his election, which is already re-election, which is already in doubt, he can give it a goodbye.
Okay, and so, perhaps Geeta can tell us more as she joins us from ground zero on what world leaders are thinking. They're thinking about their own re-elections. They're thinking about what's happening in the European Union elections, and that is where Georgia Meloni is on a high. Geeta, like Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on a high after elections in India, and those bilaterals are extremely important. Geeta,